Ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good afternoon. A warm welcome to the sixth high-level brainstorming dialogue on enhancing complementarities between the ASEAN Community Vision 2025 and the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We will now begin with the first session with opening remarks to be delivered by Thailand, to be followed by ESCAP, and finally the ASEAN Secretariat. This session is live streamed via ESCAP's YouTube channel. Without further ado, may I invite His Excellency Mr. Don Pramudwinanai, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Thailand, to deliver his opening remarks. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you all. I was saying to our Executive Secretary that I need to catch breath a bit. Just walk in and just emerge from the quarantine environment after 10 days because of the COVID. But I'm okay now, after this morning session at the cabinet, during which I had the chance to speak a bit longer than usual. It was nice to have a so-called exchange of ideas at the cabinet. It's not very rare, nor is it that frequent, but this morning in particular, there was a good exchanges and good exchange of views on a number of things. You might be interested to know that we talk about the CPTPP, and then we discuss about the PCI between Thailand and EU, and then FTAP, the free trade ideas of APEC, and also RCEP, and many other more, mostly trade-related issues. But anyway, I'm very happy to be among you today in this room, and also those who are online with virtual participation. Thank you very much. Madam Co-Chair, Executive Secretary Amida, Socialist Jabana, Dato Lim Jok Hoi, the Secretary General of ASEAN, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It certainly gives me great pleasure to preside over this sixth high-level brainstorming dialogue. It's heartening that our collective efforts in promoting sustainability in ASEAN has culminated in the organization of this dialogue for 6 years running, which clearly reflects our shared commitment to advance the sustainability agenda in the region. I wish to thank my co-chair, Madam Executive Secretary, and her team for the excellent collaboration in co-organizing this annual dialogue over the years. I would also like to extend my heartfelt congratulations to the successful 78th session of the Commission, coinciding with the 75th or 75th anniversary of UN ESCAP commemorations. Indeed, UN ESCAP has been instrumental in advancing partnership for sustainable development in the region. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic was a black swan event that has exposed the fault lines of the current exploitative economic practices. In fact, even before the pandemic, the world was reeling from the challenges of environmental impacts caused by human actions, as much as our own inactions. And we have sadly come to passively accept these practices as a byproduct of the economic growth. Needless to say, the pandemic has rolled back hard-won gains and progresses made in pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals. This calls for a renewed sense of urgency in recovering lost progresses by mainstreaming pathways to sustainable development and further integrating sustainability into all models of economic growth. It is a call to action that human activities can no longer be in direct conflict with nature, nor economic growth achieved at the expense of the environment. The post-pandemic world will undoubtedly require this paradigm shift towards a more sustainable and resilient future. And ASEAN must change with it. On Thailand's part, as I briefly touched upon at the dialogue last year, we have adopted the bio-circular green economy model, or a whole of BCG approach, as an alternative strategy for sustainable and inclusive growth. The BCG model is an approach to divert from further natural, economic, and social degradation to better safeguard both the ecosystem and human security, and to strike a balance between human and nature. Balance leads to sustainability and should therefore form the main thrust behind our thinking. The BCG concept is applicable to all the 5 priorities area under the Complementarities Initiative. We hope that it can be another disposable tool that complement our efforts to advance ASEAN community building and the Sustainable Development Goals towards a more sustainable and resilient future. And in this regard, I wish to put forth the following ideas, 4 ideas for the high-level brainstorming dialogue as some of the pathways we can opt to chart our course. First, as the BCG model aligns with many of ASEAN member states and external partners in sustainability and green policies, there are myriad of opportunities for us to work together to reinforce and strengthen the ASEAN community that is truly green and leaves no one, nor the environment, behind. This can be done through exchanges of best practices and lessons learned, transfers of technological and scientific resources to enhance capacity of ASEAN in rebuilding competitive economies and advancing a more balanced and sustainable growth. And this brings me to my second point, mainstreaming sustainable development and sustainability into ASEAN's cooperation with external partners. Sustainable development can be an area of win-win cooperation as everyone, every country will benefit from a livable and more sustainable world. After all, our livelihood, our lives are connected, no matter where we are in this world. It is therefore in the interest of all countries in the region to cooperate even more closely in this endeavor and make the Indo-Pacific a region of development and prosperity through dialogue and cooperation. I hope that the ideas and inputs that we will together All we will gather during the panel discussion today will bring about constructive cooperation, which will in turn help build strategic trust in the region and support the implementation of ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. Now, my third point is to put a stronger emphasis on youth empowerment and engagement. The future belongs to today's youth and to the future generations, as they will reap the benefits or stand to lose from the actions we take today on sustainability issues. It's certainly high time that we listen and involve members of the youth in our decision-making process so as to ensure their participation in determining our collective future. To this end, we plan to work with ASEAN colleagues and interested external partners to create an ideation space for youth across the region to play a leading role in driving sustainable changes in their hometowns and communities. This is also in line with the spirit of the BCG approach that calls for community-level engagement and inclusion. Now, my fourth and final point is the need to create a peaceful environment conducive to the advancement of the ASEAN Community Vision 2025 and the UN 2030 agenda. All of us are severely hit by both the pandemic and the challenges arising from conflicts around the globe. We therefore do not want to see competition and confrontation, but rather we must enhance partnerships among all key players to ensure the human security of all people, global peace and prosperity, as well as the sustainability of our planet. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, this pandemic and all other points referred to should serve as a call to arms to accelerate our action towards a more balanced and sustainable path to growth. I hope that what I have shared with you could offer some food for thought for today's discussion and future concrete for joint action. Sustainable development means our current ways of life should not compromise the needs of future generations. The time is now for us to take less and do more, to leave our children and grandchildren a legacy where they can enjoy a better quality of life on this planet. Now, may I take this opportunity to wish this meeting every success and look forward to your fruitful outcome. I thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. May I now invite Her Excellency Ibu Armida Salsia Alisabana, Undersecretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, to deliver her remarks. You have the floor, Ibu.
Yes. Excellency, Mr. Don Pramud Vinay, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Thailand, as well as co-chair of High-Level Brainstorming Dialogue. Excellency Dato Lim Jok Hoi, Secretary General ASEAN, who is participating live online from Jakarta. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome all of you to the 6th High-Level Brainstorming Dialogue organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Thailand and ESCAP. We meet here today amidst the still unfortunate circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the multiple crises due to climate change and the ongoing geopolitical tension with its profound socioeconomic impact, as well as dealing with the persistent effect of the various global development challenges. Collectively, these events have complicated further the trajectory towards sustainable development in the region, and in some cases, even has reversed decades of hard-won development gains. ESCAP estimates that the pandemic has pushed approximately about 85 million people back into extreme poverty. Furthermore, some 800 million informal workers across the region, our region, Asia Pacific, have been hit hardest due to a lack of job security, low skills, and the absence of social safety nets. As a result, this has widened further existing inequalities between and within countries in the region, not only in terms of incomes, but also opportunities. Moreover, the consequences of climate change, environmental degradation, which is very much prevalent throughout the region, are severe and unevenly distributed, bringing the greatest burden, especially the poorest and the vulnerable segment of the population. Again, recently, as we are all aware with, and also with concern, this geopolitical tension, especially the Ukraine crisis, which have a wide-ranging global impact to developing countries, including us in Southeast Asia and also the Asia Pacific broadly, has resulted in slower growth, rising inflation, has disrupted further trade as well as socioeconomic activities. In times like these very challenging moment, ambitious actions are needed more than ever to change course and regain momentum to accelerate progress across a range of development challenges. In this regard, it is highly relevant that ASEAN and the United Nations have been working together to promote the complementarities between ASEAN Community Vision 2025 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, recognizing the importance of partnership to the effective implementation of the 2030 Agenda, the high-level brainstorming dialogue offers a unique opportunity for dialogue to coordinate and as well as share our joint efforts. As countries strive to prepare for a post-COVID-19 era, ASEAN needs to align development pathways with a common agenda to achieve inclusive, resilient, and sustainable development. In this regard, the purpose of the discussion today is to underscore the importance of the impact of the current global events on ASEAN and to see what the UN and partners can do to mitigate the global risk and to coordinate efforts for a joint response. Allow me to highlight a few areas of policy direction and for your further deliberation. First, we must place SDGs at the center or the core of national and subnational development agenda. The entire Asia-Pacific region, as we are all aware, is not on track to achieve any of the 17 goals by 2030. This is even before the COVID-19 pandemic and has become more challenging, of course, with the pandemic. Therefore, there is an increased urgency to ensure that policy packages in the recovery phase and beyond, especially in Southeast Asia as regards to the ASEAN context, as well as at the national level, regain momentum in accelerated progress towards the goals, the SDG goals. Second, steering policy action and reform towards more inclusive and environmentally sustainable growth. For more than 2 years, the pandemic has squeezed the fiscal space of government, thereby requiring public expenditure to now focus on sectors that have the largest impact on inequality, poverty, and long-term growth, long-term sustainable growth, that is. More ambitious climate action should be prioritized as greenhouse gas emissions continue to rise rapidly in the region, and the use of renewable energy falls well short of the targets set out in the goals. Lastly, fostering regional cooperation is needed to build forward better, and where multilateral cooperation not only matters but also very crucial, very strategic. Therefore, we must capitalize on this important year when several ASEAN member states are leading multilateral forums. Besides Cambodia, who is chairing or the current chair of ASEAN, Indonesia, the current presidency of G20, Thailand is also the chair of APEC of this year. These forums provide a great platform to support regional cooperation and integration, as well as promote multilateralism. Cooperation across the APEC and G20 countries, as well as ASEAN dialogue partners and international organizations, may support, for example, all these efforts that are needed, such as technology transfer, capacity building, to effectively address all these challenges, such as climate change, joint efforts on key environmental issues, and tackle socio-economic challenges stemming from the ongoing crisis. For our part, the ESCAP and ASEAN partnership has grown over the years through engagement to deliver all this meaningful, not only in terms of commitment, but also the commitment translated to concrete, real action. We look forward to continuing this cooperation as we navigate out of the crisis and refocus on progress in the 2030 agenda. In closing, I wish you all a very successful and also fruitful meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ibu Armida. May I now invite His Excellency Dato Lim Jokhoi, Secretary General of ASEAN, to deliver his remarks. You have the floor, Dato.
His Excellency Don Pramat Winai, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Thailand, Her Excellency Armida Salasia Ali Sejana, your Under Secretary General of United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Excellency, senior official from member state, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. Allow me to begin by congratulating the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Thailand and ESCAP for successfully organizing the 6th high-level brainstorming dialogue. This platform continues to serve as a valuable venue for learning and exchanging best practices, as well as identifying new and emerging approaches that could accelerate the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, this policy dialogue provides an opportunity for us to update one another on priority area for action to reach SDG targets, especially as we fast-track initiative to recover from COVID-19 pandemic and build on a more inclusive and sustainable ASEAN community. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, ASEANs continue to proactively address the impact of the pandemic, while at the same time seizing opportunity to integrate inclusive and sustainable approach that complement and reinforce the attainment of the SDGs. Although the region's economy has returned to pre-pandemic level and is projected to grow by 4.9% this year and 5.2% in 2023, we should remember that an estimated 10 million people have been pushed back to extreme poverty by the pandemic. Given this, we must strive to also achieve inclusive growth in ASEAN in our recovery efforts. Our recovery is also contingent on the equitable rollout of the vaccination programs. I'm pleased to inform that currently more than 66% of the ASEAN population have been fully vaccinated. We are therefore on course to achieve the WHO target of vaccinating 70% of the population by mid-2022. Nevertheless, ASEANs remain vigilant against downside risks of the recovery caused by the deteriorating global environment. These include disruption to supply of key commodities such as food, fuel, fertilizer, and metals due to geopolitical tension, rising costs in logistics and transport, economic slowdown in major economies, and high inflationary pressures. In this regard, ASEAN is fully committed to implementing the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework as the strategy for the ASEAN to rebound stronger, more inclusive, more sustainable, and more resilient for the future crisis. Taking a whole of ASEAN community approach, the framework and its implementation plan sets out 5 broad strategies focusing on health system, human security, economic integration, inclusive digital transformation, as well as sustainable, and to realize a sustainable and people-centered ASEAN community. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with the adoption of the ASEAN Travel Corridor Arrangement Framework last year, all ASEAN member states have reopened their borders to welcome fully vaccinated travelers. Our priority now is to strengthen this framework by having a harmonized vaccination recognition portal to facilitate safe regional mobility. To further reinforce the complementarity between the ASEAN Community 2025 and the SDG in the context of recovering from the pandemic, the 15th ASEAN Health Ministers meeting held in May 2022 reaffirmed the commitment to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This includes the commitments to continue building regional health system resilience and accelerating COVID-19 recovery as part of the overarching health goal to ensure healthy life and promote well-being for all the ages. Such commitment concretely cover mobilizing resources by exploring an expanded regional funding mechanism for COVID-19 recovery. This includes the ASEAN COVID-19 Response Fund and the ASEAN Regional Reserve and medical supply, as well as taking measures to ensure timeliness and efficiency of accessing and using of these resources, among others. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, ASEAN remains steadfast in the commitment to achieve the SDG through strategic initiative across the 3 ASEAN community pillars. At this juncture, allowed me to highlight some notable developments that ASEAN has achieved in the past year, which further underscore the complementarities between our 2 development agendas. In October 2021, ASEAN adopted framework for circular economy for the ASEAN Economic Community at the 20th ASEAN Economic Ministers Council meeting. With this framework, ASEAN aims to achieve resilient and resource-efficient economic growth. The circular economy model supports sustainable development by making effective and efficient use of materials and energy, thereby reducing resource use in the production and promoting sustainable consumption. Recognizing a broader strategy is needed to support member states in achieving the climate agenda. ASEAN is also developing a strategy for carbon neutrality that will create a pathway for decarbonization and transitions towards a low-carbon circular economy. In November 2021, the 12th ASEAN Minister meeting on rural development and poverty eradication recognized the successful conduct of the 5th ASEAN-China UNDP Symposium, enhancing the role of youth in achieving the SDG held in April 2021, and the ASEAN Ministerial Dialogue on Accelerating Action to achieve the SDG held in September 2021. Meanwhile, in December 2021, the 6th ASEAN-China UNDP Symposium on SDG focusing on reducing inequality in the decade of action to achieve the SDG and recovery from COVID-19. Through the leadership of Thailand in partnership with European Union, the ASEAN-EU Dialogue on Sustainable Development has been regularly convened. The 3rd dialogue under the theme Towards Greener, More Innovative, Equal and Inclusive Future, held in November 2021, featured the launch of the Team Europe Green Initiative for ASEAN
Southeast Asia. This initiative provides the framework for joint action seeking synergy between the European Green Deals and the ASEAN Community Vision 2025. Lastly, the ASEAN Foreign Minister Retreat held in February 2022 also reaffirmed such a commitment to enhancing sustainable development cooperation, including with external partners, by promoting complementarity initiatives. In particular, the Foreign Minister reiterated support for the effective implementation of the complementarity roadmap and for the work of ASEAN Center for Sustainable Development Studies and Dialogue. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, there is much work ahead of us, particularly for the decade of action calling for accelerating action to achieve the SDG, coincide with the second half of the implementing of the ASEAN Community 2025. To prepare for the next development of the regions, the ASEAN leaders adopted the High Hanoi Declaration on ASEAN Community Post-2025 Vision. This high-level policy guidance clearly recognizes the complementarity between the post-2025 vision and the attainment of the SDG as a critical component to the development of an inclusive, resilient, and sustainable path for the future. On this note, I encourage all of us to continue using this platform to learn from one another, more importantly, to facilitate partnership and cooperation that would accelerate the achievement of the SDGs as well as the ASEAN Community Vision 2025 and beyond. I hope our discussion today will bear fruitful outcome. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dato. We will now proceed with a group photo. May we invite heads of delegation to join for the group photo. For those present in the room, please come forward to the rostrum and kindly keep your masks on during the photo. For those online, to please turn on your camera.
เรียกตามนะ